Hello students, welcome to Byju's IAS. In the last couple of months, there has been a lot of discussion related to two very important issues between India and the WTO. One is the concept of agriculture subsidies. For example, you must have read about the concept of a peace clause which has been used by Government of India for the second year. And the second one with respect to India and South Africa coming out with a proposal and asking for a TRIPS waiver under WTO. So in today's live session, we'll have a discussion related to both of these particular issues in detail. Now, let me begin with some of the very important basics which will help you to understand what is actually the discussion that has been happening in the recent days. First and foremost, WTO stands for World Trade Organization. It is basically a multilateral grouping, or it is a group of many countries which was established in the year 1995. Now, before we established WTO, before WTO came into action, there were different rounds of negotiations. These particular member countries came together, held negotiations, which are famously referred to as the idea of Uruguay rounds. Now, these particular negotiations were conducted from 1986 to 93. Then in the year 1994, there was a signing of an agreement which is referred to as Marrakesh Agreement. This is also famously known as a WTO Agreement. So with the signing of a Marrakesh Agreement in the year 1995, WTO came into force, or WTO was established. First point. Second point. India is a founding member of WTO. We were basically part of negotiations, and we were also part of the group of countries which started or which were in the beginning of WTO. Third very important point, under WTO, multiple agreements have been signed. Is it okay? Under WTO, multiple agreements have been signed. In today's discussion, you will have to focus on two very important agreements. One is the Agreement on Agriculture. The first one is what? Agreement on Agriculture. I'll use a short form here, AOA. It is a part of the discussion under the concept of a GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. Second very important agreement which is related to the discussion, or which is the central theme of the discussion today, is the concept of TRIPS. Trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. So these two are the central parts of the discussion that we'll be conducting today. Let me go to the next point. What is the structure of WTO? This is important. Follow this. Under the structure of WTO, the highest decision making body under WTO is a Ministerial Conference. I'll use a short form here, MC, Ministerial Conference. Now, in case of a ministerial conference, there is a representation of all the member countries. And generally once every 2 years, they will come together, hold a discussion, and the most of the important decisions are taken in the ministerial conference. But please understand this, ministerial conference is held once every 2 years. What about those time periods, or what about these particular years where there is no ministerial conference? Who has to take decisions related to activities under WTO? For that, there is a General Council. There is one more authority, General Council. General Council will have again the representation of all the member countries. This particular same General Council will act as a trade dispute body. Is it okay? It will also act as a body to resolve trade disputes. We'll use the term dispute redressal body. It will also act as a body for trade policy review. In simple terms, it will review the performance of various member countries with respect to implementation of the agreements in these particular countries. In addition to this, remember this, under General Council, there are also councils for the trade on goods. There is a council for trade on services. There is also a council for TRIPS. So this is another very important point you will have to remember, because when I discuss how the TRIPS waiver is provided, you will have to remember the structure of a WTO, which will help you in understanding the process of waivers. So these are some of the important points. Now let me go to the idea of agriculture subsidies. Now in case of the countries, all the member countries of WTO which have agriculture sector will provide certain support to these particular agriculture sector. Now this particular support could be in a different form. For example, the support that is provided by the government could be in the form of input subsidies, right? Input subsidy is in the form of a fertilizer subsidy, right? Or interest subvention, or let's say seed subsidy, or it could be in the form of a price support, right? As in case of India, we provide MSP, right? And that is in the central part of the discussion here. So have a look at this. In order to regulate and promote the agriculture sector across all these particular member countries, there were three very important pillars which were established under Agreement on Agriculture. Is it okay? Under the Agreement on Agriculture, there are three very important pillars. Understand these particular three pillars very, very carefully. The first one is the concept of market access. What do you mean by market access? Generally, whenever there is a trade between countries like this, imagine there is a trade being conducted between two countries A and B. This particular trade can be hindered, can be obstructed by imposing tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. Is it okay? The trade between two countries can be affected, can be hindered by imposing tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. Even before WTO, there were a lot of tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers which were imposed by different countries on the agriculture products that were traded between them. Now, what is the meaning of a tariff barrier? For example, imagine A is exporting some agriculture commodity to B. Now, the country B or the government of B will impose customs, will impose taxes on these particular imports. And whenever these particular taxes are imposed or duties are imposed, this is the example of a tariff barrier. Higher these particular taxes which are imposed, it will have a distorting effect on the trade. It will basically disrupt the trade that is happening between these two countries. Now, example of non-tariff barriers, there are different types. There is example of a quota, there is example of a monetary restriction, so on and so forth. Let me focus on one of them. But basically, definition of non-tariff, they'll basically say that all those particular barriers which are not tariff barriers. I'll repeat the statement here. There is no definition for non-tariff barriers. Generally, they will say that all those particular barriers which are not tariff barriers are by default non-tariff barrier. For example, I used one term, quota system. But basically under quota, what will happen is, imagine B is the importing country. Government of B will basically tell the importers, you are allowed to import but not beyond these particular volumes of goods. Is it okay? If the government imposes restriction with respect to quantity of the goods which are imported, generally that is a type of a quota restriction. So have a look at this. The trade between countries A and B, either be it goods, right, or any type of a goods for that matter, can be affected by tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. So even before WTO was established, there were different types of non-tariff barriers which were imposed by member countries of WTO. So under the concept of a market access, we basically propose that these particular non-tariff barriers will have to be converted into tariff barriers. Or else they will use one technical statement. They will say that under the idea of a market access, we'll go for tariffication. We will go for tariffication, which essentially means these particular non-tariff barriers will have to be converted, will have to be withdrawn, will have to be eliminated. Even today, are the tariff barriers allowed? Yes, tariff barriers are allowed with certain limitations. So that is the first point. When you are going to go for a tariffication, eliminate these particular non-tariff barriers, obviously the restriction of the trade will be withdrawn. That is the first point. Second, export subsidies. Whenever you are exporting these agriculture commodities from one country to another country, you should not provide subsidies for your exports. Because if you provide subsidies for your exports, or if you link your subsidies to the exports, then your exports will be very, very competitive in other countries. And that will basically create a distortion in the market. So, do not provide export subsidies. And the third and the most important part of agreement on agriculture is the idea of a domestic support. Have a look at this. Under the domestic support, we followed a concept of a traffic light approach. Is it okay? We follow a concept of a traffic light approach. What do you mean by traffic light approach? The subsidies that are provided under domestic support will be categorized into different classifications or into different boxes. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. The subsidies that are provided by the government to agriculture sector will be divided into different groups, and to denote or to represent these particular groups, we are going to use the colors which are used in the traffic light. What are the traffic light colors? We use red color in the traffic, we use amber color in the traffic, and we use green color. What is the representation? What is the importance of these particular colors? Red basically means stop, prohibited, movement is prohibited. Amber means slow down. And for most of the Indians, amber means you should go much faster, because obviously the next color will be red. But anyways, amber means you will have to slow down. And green means permitted. Is it okay? So have a look at this. We'll use the same concept to divide these particular agriculture subsidies. Now those particular subsidies which will not create any distortion in the market. I repeat, those particular subsidies which do not create any distortion in the market or create a very, very least amount of a distortion are classified under green box subsidies. I'll repeat the statement here. Those particular subsidies which create a very, very low amount of a distortion, least distortion, or no distortion at all are kept under green box subsidies. And please understand this, because these are not creating any distortion, there is no limit on how much green box subsidies you are supposed to provide. Now what do you mean by distortion? Let me give a very simple example here. Imagine there are two countries A and B. There are two countries A and B. Both of the countries are involved in agriculture production. Now what are the inputs you will require for agriculture production? You will require fertilizer. You will require electricity for irrigation. You will require seeds for cultivation, etc. I'll take three inputs, more than sufficient. So imagine in country A, there are no subsidies provided on these particular inputs. So essentially what will happen? Let's take certain arbitrary numbers here. Fertilizer, let's imagine the cost is 10 rupee. Electricity, cost is 20 rupee. Seeds, cost is 30 rupee. I'm just throwing arbitrary numbers here. Don't ask, sir, why exactly 10 rupees? Tell me. I'm just taking arbitrary numbers. You don't have to know exact numbers here. So in case of country A, what is the cost of cultivation? What is the cost of inputs used here? 60 rupees. Come to the second country B. Imagine in the second country, government provides huge amount of subsidies for all of them. Right? Fertilizer. Right? In case of India itself, huge amount of subsidies are provided for fertilizer. Let's take an arbitrary number. Rather than selling it at A, rather than selling it at 10 rupee, imagine in India it is sold at 5 rupees. Electricity, in many of the states in India, electricity for irrigation purposes is provided free of a cost. Free of a cost. Use it for agriculture purposes. Don't pay us anything on that. But let's say for sake of calculation, let's assume it is sold at 10 rupees here. And in case of seeds, again let's assume subsidy is provided and is sold at 15 rupees in the second country B. As a result of this, what is the cost of cultivation here? In the second country, cost of cultivation is 30 rupees. So as a result of this, can I simply say that the trade between both of the countries will be distorted. This particular country, that is from the second country, it will make more sense for them to start exporting to the first country. So have a look at this, because in the second country, government provides a lot of these particular subsidies. It will basically distort the trade between these two countries. That is the precise reason why this particular idea of subsidies provided in the agriculture sector will be divided into these particular boxes. And those particular subsidies which do not create any kind of a distortion or create a very low amount of a distortion, negligible distortion, are kept under green box subsidies. For example, in case of India, we provide subsidies under PM Kisan, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. Under the PM Kisan scheme, we are providing annual income support to the farmers to the extent of 6,000 rupees. But please understand, this particular income support is not in the form of any of the other subsidies, for example, fertilizer subsidy, which will make it easier for the farmer to cultivate at a lower cost. So PM Kisan scheme is a prime example of a green box subsidy in case of India. And in case of green box subsidies, please remember this, there are no limits, there are no restrictions imposed by the WTO. You can provide as much as a green subsidies or green box subsidies to the agriculture sector. Generally, we say that examples of green box subsidies are the subsidies provided for warehousing facility, subsidies provided for development of infrastructure in the agriculture sector, subsidies provided for research and development, subsidies provided for marketing of agriculture commodities. These are all generally classified under the concept of green box subsidies. Let me go to the next one, amber box subsidies. Within the idea of amber box subsidies, there are two concepts. Understand this very carefully. On the face of it, what are amber box subsidies? We'll simply say that those particular subsidies which are provided by the government, which will distort the market, are amber box subsidies. In case of India, we provide subsidies which are linked to product and which are not linked to the product. Is it okay? One is a product based subsidy and the second one is a non-product based subsidy. For example, of non-product based subsidy, fertilizer subsidy provided in India. Subsidy is provided for let's say availing the loans, agriculture loans at a lower rate of interest. Interest subvention scheme. Subsidy is provided right in the form of a free electricity or electricity at a subsidized cost for agriculture sector. These are subsidies. These are going to distort the trade, but please understand these are non-product subsidies or non-product specific type of subsidies. Whereas a product specific subsidies, best example is MSP, minimum support price. Government of India announces the MSP before the sowing season begins. And under the MSP, government announces MSP for more than 20 crops. Government of India's document says 23 crops. Argument here is, whenever MSP is announced, government will procure the food grains and pay this particular price to the farmer who is selling this particular food grain to the government. Is it okay? Why I am telling this is for a simple reason. Government although announces MSP for 23 crops, most of the procurement is in the form of a rice and wheat. Is it okay? Most of the procurement is in the form of a rice and wheat. And why government procures so much of a rice and wheat? For a simple reason, government runs a huge number of food programs in India. Is it okay? And there is a concept of a public stock holding, and that is in the eye of the storm, or that is the central discussion that has been happening between the government of India as well as USA, which I will discuss in the next slide. So have a look at this. There are product specific subsidies which are provided and non-product based subsidies which are also provided. So basically these are distorting subsidies. These are distorting the market. Now some of you will keep on thinking, sir, how MSP is distorting the market? Let me give a very simple idea here. When government provides MSP and starts procuring these particular food grains from the market, generally what happens is cultivation of the same crop increases. Is it okay? Because government will say that I am going to procure, let's say, paddy at 4,000 rupees a quintal. Whatever the exact number, don't worry about it. Right? So when government announces a higher MSP for these particular crops, farmers tend to cultivate these particular crops more and more in India. That's the first step. When the cultivation increases, the supply of these particular commodities in the market will also increase. Now, in order to take out some of the supply and export it to international market, government ends up providing again export related subsidies to these particular products. Is it okay? Government, in order to reduce or take out excess supply of these particular food grains from the market, will end up providing subsidies for these particular crops. Right? These are again export linked subsidies. Let me give a simple example here. There is a scheme called as MEIS. Rather than saying there is, I'll use the term there was. Okay? There was a scheme called as MEIS, Merchandise Exports from India Scheme. Under MEIS, Government of India announced this under Foreign Trade Policy 2015-2020, which has been expanded now. The basic idea was government would identify certain merchandise, and if you are exporting them to the international market, government would be providing certain rewards. Government would be providing certain incentives or subsidies for promoting these particular exports. Now let me connect it to agriculture sector. One of the outcomes of the products of agriculture sector is non-basmati rice. Non-basmati rice. And Government of India, in order to promote this particular non-basmati rice from India to rest of the world, covered this under MEIS and announced 5% reward on the export of this. So have a look at this. One, because of a higher MSP that Government of India announces, because it wants to procure the food grains in the market, the cultivation becomes higher, the supply in the market is higher, government is procuring it, but even after that there is a huge amount of a supply in the market. Now to promote exports, Government of India again announces subsidies on these particular agriculture commodities. Now, because if I am an exporter, because I want to earn more subsidies like this and government gives me subsidy, my exports will increase from India to, let's say, USA or to rest of the world. And because government is giving subsidy, obviously my exports will become very, very competitive in the international market. So don't you think US as a country will be concerned about what kind of subsidies Government of India provides in India for agriculture sector? And that is the reason these kind of subsidies are generally opposed by the other member countries. Let me go to the next point. So have a look at this. In case of Amber Box, product specific, non-product subsidies are provided. Now generally these kinds of subsidies are added together and they use a technical term AMS. Aggregate measure of a support. Okay, AMS stands for aggregate measure of a support. And under the WTO, because these particular subsidies are distorting the market trade like this, because these subsidies are distorting the international trade, there is a limit on how much subsidies you are supposed to provide under the Amber Box. Is it okay? There is a limit as to how much subsidies you are supposed to provide, right, with respect to those subsidies which are kept under the Amber Box subsidy. That limit is referred to as a de minimis level. Very, very famous de minimis level. De minimis level. And the de minimis level with respect to these kinds of subsidies, for example, product specific subsidies, under the de minimis level, it stipulates that developing countries should be limiting their AMS to 10% of total value of the production. Is it okay? I'll repeat the statement. In case of a developing countries, they should limit their subsidies to maximum 10% of the value of production. For example, if Government of India is procuring paddy, then the amount of a subsidy that is provided by the government to procure that, it should be limited to 10% of the value of paddy production in that year. That is the condition. Whereas in case of developed countries, this particular de minimis level has been kept at 5%. Is it okay? So this particular limitation is applicable to product specific also as well as non-product subsidies also. But basically what they will do is they will calculate these subsidies in the form of AMS and then apply the limitation like this. Let me go to the third type of the subsidy here, blue box subsidy. Now in case of a blue box subsidy, what happens? Please understand, in case of a blue box subsidies, the subsidies are provided. Now these particular subsidies will limit the production of a particular commodity. Is it okay? Blue box subsidies are those subsidies which will limit the volume of production of a particular crop. Right? That is the reason these are called as a limitation subsidies. Now, for example, in case of India, we do not have a blue box subsidy. In case of European countries, there was a blue box subsidy, which basically limited, or the subsidy was limited to based on the volume of the land which was cultivated, or number of animals that were basically used for the agriculture and allied activities. In case of China also, in 2016, they used a blue box subsidy, wherein they try to limit the amount of a corn production. They try to limit amount of a corn production, and they basically said, if you produce this much amount of a corn, I will give you this much amount of a subsidy. But if you cross this particular threshold, once you cross the threshold, subsidy would not be provided. So idea is what? In case of a blue box subsidies, these subsidies are provided by the government and they will limit the production. They will impose a certain limitation on production. Right? This is the idea of a blue box subsidies. And under WTO, is there any limitation with respect to how much should be the blue box subsidies? Again, there is no limitation. Will they distort? Yes. WTO says these are also distorting. But please understand, we are not imposing limits on this for a simple reason. These are going to limit how much volume of production is done. These are going to control the volume of production. That's a precise reason. So these are the three very important classifications with respect to subsidies. Now if you remember, in case of the traffic light, I said there is a red light. In case of the agriculture subsidies or the boxes under the agriculture subsidies, we do not use the red box as such. These are prohibited subsidies. We do not use that particular subsidy. In addition to these three types, again there is one more type of a subsidy, development subsidy, generally given to developing countries, where if the government targets these particular subsidies to poor farmers, if they are using it for regional development, generally those kinds of subsidies, there is a relaxation under the WTO guidelines, and these are referred as a development subsidies. Okay. So this is a basic discussion with respect to agriculture subsidies, which are part of agreement on agriculture. Now, what is this particular issue of public stock holding? What is this issue of public stock holding which is discussed so much? First and foremost, we have already discussed this. Government of India provides something called as a MSP, minimum support price. Now some of you would be thinking, sir, if there are so many issues with MSP, why is the Government of India providing the MSP? This idea of a MSP was introduced post 1960s in India, somewhere mid 1960s and 70s. The objective was very simple. Because of the excess production, because of a very high production, this was the time period of Green Revolution in India. So argument was, because of Green Revolution, the production would simply expand in the market, and when the production increases, supply will increase in the market. And when supply increases, obviously the market prices will start stumbling down, will start crashing. At this particular point of time, we want to support the farmers. We want to provide certain relief to the farmers. And that is a precise reason, over a period of time, this idea has evolved into the concept of a minimum support price. Done? Now, argument is, when Government of India uses this particular MSP, procures it, it maintains huge amount of food grains, and we use this particular term to represent that. We use the term public stock holding. And against this, USA government has been opposed to this. Right? What is the argument? USA government says, because you are announcing MSP, production is happening, and then these are being exported to my country. I am unable to export these particular goods to you, but you are exporting them to me. All of this is simply happening because you are providing MSP. So you will have to reduce the amount of MSP that you are providing, because you are crossing this particular de minimis level. There has been a contention which has been happening for many years between India and USA with respect to this idea of a public stock holding itself. Now, why does Government of India continue with this particular public stock holding? Follow this very carefully. Government of India says, in case of India, there are large number of farmers. There are large number of farmers who are very poor. Is it okay? There are large number of farmers who are very poor. They do not have sufficient resources to cultivate or to basically conduct agriculture. So for them, I am providing certain relief. For them, I'm providing a route wherein they can produce the goods, sell them and have certain minimum earnings which they can use for cultivation in the next cycle. Right? That is, basically understand this, they will use the term small and marginal farmers. Small and marginal farmers. Who are small and marginal farmers? Who are cultivating on a piece of land up to 2 hectares. Is it okay? Whenever they are cultivating on a piece of land up to 2 hectares, this is called as a small and marginal farming. So in case of India, there are large number of farmers and they do not have sufficient resources. So I'm providing certain measure through which they can sell the goods to me or they can sell the food grains to me and earn certain income. That's the first one. Second one, argument of Government of India is the methodology that you are using. Follow this very carefully. The methodology that you are using to calculate this AMS, so on and so forth, we are not happy with the methodology. Now for UPSC exams, should you learn this methodology? Not required. For UPSC, this is not required. Simply remember the statement, we are using the base year of 1986 to 88. Why this base year? Uruguay round of negotiations. So we are using the base year of 86 to 88 to calculate this particular AMS or limitation on the AMS. The methodology does not consider the inflation that has happened across the countries. That's the first one. Second one, this methodology is a very old methodology. We are post 2020 now, we have crossed 2020. In essence, the methodology is a 3-decade-old methodology. So Government of India says we are not happy with the methodology, you will have to change the methodology. And the third very important point is, out of all these kinds of subsidies which are provided, under WTO, if you talk about the 10% limit, yes, we might be, right, sometimes be very nearer to 10%, we might be crossing 10%, yes, that's a possibility. But when you talk about per farmer subsidy, USA provides the highest amount of a subsidy to them. Under the Amber Box itself, USA somewhere provides more than $7,200 per farmer in USA. Right, the other group, European Union, it provides more than $1,200 right, per farmer in their countries. India provides somewhere around $49 per farmer. So when you talk about per farmer, look at where India stands. But in case of agreement on agriculture, it doesn't consider per farmer, it focuses on the overall subsidies provided. And even if you took right, the idea of this is only Amber Box. Is it okay? I'm talking about this only in the context of Amber Box. Now, if you look at the overall subsidies provided, earlier we have taken only Amber Box subsidies. Now, if you take overall subsidies, a developed country such as USA provides more than $61,000 per farmer in the form of agriculture support. European Union provides more than $8,000 right, per farmer right, in their particular countries. India provides $282 per farmer in the form of a aggregate measure of a support. So look at the per farmer comparison. India's performance in terms of providing the support is very, very low compared to these particular economies. That is another argument. So citing these particular arguments, Government of India repeatedly has been saying we will not agree with any of the resolution which will try to restrict, which will try to impose certain restrictions on how much subsidies we are supposed to provide to our farmers. Is it okay? This is one side of the argument. What is the other side of the argument? Right, in favor as well as opposition to this particular idea. In terms of favor is, WTO has put certain restrictions. We decided that under agreement on agriculture, you are not supposed to provide more than this much amount of a subsidy. India has been crossing this particular limit in the recent times. Right, in the recent times, so for example, the subsidies which are provided to rice in the year 2018-2017, India has crossed this particular 10% limit. India has been crossing this particular de minimis level, right, by crossing or by taking this particular subsidies to more than 10% of the value of the production of the commodity, that is rice. And in the context of this, what has happened? If you cross more than 10%, other trading partners will simply drag you to WTO, file a complaint under WTO. But have a look at this. One interesting thing that is there under WTO is there is one clause called as a peace clause. Is it okay? There is something called as a peace clause. This idea of a peace clause was inserted into the WTO discussion post 2013. In 2013, there was a ministerial conference in Bali, very famous, known as the Bali Conference. And after that, in 2014, Government of India said, no, we want a permanent solution with respect to issue of a public stock holding. And that is the precise reason the idea of a peace clause was inserted into WTO's agreements. And what is a peace clause? If you're a developing country, this is applicable to developing countries. If you are a developing country and the amount of subsidies that you have provided have crossed more than 10% limit, then you can simply say you will use the peace clause. And when you say you are going to use the peace clause, no other country can file a complaint against you. Is it okay? The peace clause will basically give a leverage to developing country. Even when they cross more than 10% limit, no complaint, no action shall be taken against this particular country. So issue is, various developed economies have been arguing that Government of India consistently has been giving very high amount of subsidies, and that is violating the WTO agreement. Right? And Government of India has been putting forward these particular arguments and has been saying that, one, I want a permanent solution for a public stock holding issue, and the second one, even if I am crossing, I will use the peace clause. And this particular idea of a peace clause has been used for the second year by Government of India very recently. Right? And that is the reason this particular issue of agriculture subsidies is there in the discussion. Done? So this is the discussion with respect to agriculture subsidies under WTO. Let me go to the second very important issue, the issue of the waiver under TRIPS. As already mentioned, what is the idea for TRIPS? It is one of the agreements under WTO. TRIPS basically stands for trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. Now this idea for TRIPS or the agreement of TRIPS came into force from 1st January 1995. Just like the agreement on agriculture, this also came into force on 1st January 1995, and that is also the time when WTO was established. Now what is given under the TRIPS? Now before that, have a look at the term here. There is a concept called as intellectual property. What is this idea of intellectual property? If I want to put it in a very simple terms, let me simplify this. Intellectual property refers to creation of a mind. Is it okay? It refers to creation of a mind. Now what do you mean by creation of a mind? Creation of a mind in the form of a technology, in the form of a particular process, etc. So generally, when there is a creation of a mind like this, the one who has created, the company which has created is given protection. Is it okay? The company which has created this or which owns this particular creation is given certain protection, and different types of protections are, one is a patent, trademark, copyright, trade secret, industrial designs, etc. And please understand this, under WTO, that is specifically under the TRIPS Act, these kinds of the terminologies have been used. For example, in part 2 of a TRIPS agreement, we have recognized a patent, we have recognized a trademark, we have basically recognized a copyright. Different sections have been given. Section 1 basically refers to copyright, Section 4 refers to industrial designs, Section 5 refers to patent, so on and so forth. So idea is, under the TRIPS, what we have done, we have tried to provide the protection to these kinds of creations of a mind. And all the member countries will have to pass a legislative piece, that is, they will have to bring into force an act which will provide protection to these kinds of creation of a mind or intellectual properties. And they will have to submit their legislative piece or the piece of legislation to the TRIPS authority or the Council for TRIPS under WTO, and other member countries can get access to this particular piece of legislation and they will evaluate. For example, they will evaluate whether India's Patent Act provides sufficient protection to the patent holders or not. right? Is there any regulation, is there any provision which can be used to violate the rights of these particular patent holders, etc. Now please understand, under certain circumstances, these particular rights which are given to these creations can be used by the governments. Right? For example, imagine there is one company which is holding a particular patent for a drug. Is it okay? There is one company, or the drugs company, or any pharmaceutical company which is owning a patent which has been given by Government of India with regards to a particular drug. Now Government of India can basically use this in certain emergency situations. Is it okay? If there is a public health issue, if there is an emergency situation, then Government of India can simply take this particular patent, give it to any other company in the domestic market, and the second company which has got the patent right now, which has got the access to patent now, or which has got the access to, let's say, a drug which was patented, can manufacture this particular drug at a lower cost in the domestic market. Is it okay? There is a terminology called as compulsory licensing. This is a context of compulsory licensing. Is it okay? So idea of compulsory licensing is what? Imagine I am the patent holder, right? There is a public health issue now. Government of India can simply take the patent right from me, right? I am not losing the patent, but the drug that is patented by me is supposed to be manufactured by me only. But Government of India can identify any domestic company and say, in addition to me, he is also allowed to manufacture that particular drug. And the idea is when other manufacturers or generics are going to produce these particular drugs, these will be provided in the market at a very, very cheaper rates. Right? So idea is compulsory licensing can be used. Second one is voluntary licensing. Remember all of them. One is a compulsory licensing and the second one is voluntary licensing. What is the idea of a voluntary licensing? And this was there very recently in the context of remdesivir. And I'm pretty sure all of you heard of this particular drug, remdesivir. And the company which is manufacturing this particular remdesivir has the patent is a Gilead company. Gilead company. Remember this also. So have a look at this. Whenever you talk about voluntary licensing, it simply means the one who owns the patent will enter into agreements with other companies, will give the right of producing the same drug to other companies also. Is it okay? The company which owns the patent will enter into agreement with other companies and will give the right of manufacturing of the same drug to other companies also. And they will accept certain payments from the other companies which are given the right to manufacture the same drug. Same thing happens even in case of compulsory licensing. Anybody who holds a patent should be making certain earnings from these particular patents. Now either you go for a compulsory licensing, voluntary licensing, the other company which is manufacturing will pay certain amount to the original patent holder. And if there is no compulsory or voluntary licensing, you are the only supplier, you are going to fix the price of this particular drug at a very, very high level. You are going to sell them at a very exorbitant level in the market. Thereby you will make huge amount of earnings there. So anyways, the idea is whenever you have these kinds of intellectual property rights, you should be able to earn from that. That is the kind of a protection that is provided under the concept of a TRIPS. Now, what is the issue with this particular access to, right, these particular drugs? Now, with the onset of the pandemic, with the rise of the COVID cases around the world, what has happened? The number of people who are getting contracted by this, it has increased. Number of people who are dying because of this has increased. Now, at this particular point of time, it should be ensured that the equipments which are used to treat the COVID or the masks which are very, very essential to contain COVID, or the drugs or vaccines which are used in protection as well as containing the spread of the COVID should be available to every country. Is it okay? The technology that is used to manufacture them, that is vaccines or drugs, it should be available to all the countries. Now what has happened? Many of these particular countries have entered into different contracts or independent contracts with very few of these particular manufacturers who have patents. Is it okay? Those who have developed drugs or vaccines have patents on them, and independent countries or different countries have entered into a supply contract with these particular countries or with these particular companies only. But the argument here is, what about those particular countries which are poor countries? What about those countries where the supply of these particular vaccines will be delayed because of these agreements? Don't you think the pandemic will basically destroy the economy of these particular countries? And more than economy, what about the lives which will be lost because of this? So what happened was, government of India as well as South Africa came out with a proposal. And they said that we must promote access to these kinds of drugs, diagnostics materials, technology, manufacturing of mask, vaccines, etc. We must waive off, follow this very carefully, we must simply waive off the protection, right, that is given under the TRIPS for these kinds of technologies. Is it okay? For example, remdesivir, have a look at this. This has been in the center of discussion in the recent times. Why? Like I said, there is one company, Gilead, which has a patent for manufacturing this particular main component of a remdesivir. And this particular patent has been given to this particular company in more than 70 countries. But have a look at this. This particular company very recently has entered into secret agreements and has provided voluntary licenses to many other manufacturers or producers. For example, in case of India, Cipla is producing it, right? Reddy's laboratory is producing it. So idea is they have got, or they are part of the voluntary licenses, but this particular voluntary license agreement was signed in a very secretive manner. And as a result of this, what has happened? More than half of the population which lives in other countries where the producers have not been able to enter into voluntary license with this particular company. In essence, very few companies have got the voluntary license now. They will manufacture and supply in their domestic market. Only when there is an excess, they can export it to other countries. Now, what if there is a country such as A, B or C? From these particular three countries, there is no producer who has the voluntary license to manufacture this particular drug. And this has been a very important drug in the recent times against the fight of COVID. That is the issue which has been raised by India. And in fact, if you have seen the situation in case of India, there is a huge shortage of remdesivir itself. And to basically buttress their argument, to prove that they are right, they have used the case of HIV drugs. Before 2001, there was the issue with respect to HIV drugs. It was patented. In simple terms, it was patented by a particular company. And the drug that was sold to the patients for annual consumption of this particular drug, they used to spend anywhere around $10,000 for a particular patient for 1 year dose of the HIV drugs. They used to shell out more than $10,000, not rupees, dollars. That was such a high level of exorbitant pricing for this particular HIV drug. Later what happened, in 2001, there was one declaration at Doha. Remember this particular place, Doha Declaration. Doha Declaration on Public Health. This particular declaration on public health basically allowed a situation wherein the governments could simply use compulsory licensing. Is it okay? They made it very easy for the governments to use compulsory licensing. And under Doha Declaration, they basically said that the situations which will necessitate emergency, or the countries will be given a free hand to decide what is emergency. What is a public health emergency? The respective governments will decide. There is no international authority which is going to decide it. Respective countries will decide it. That has been one of the very important declarations which is by the name of Doha Declaration. Remember this. Right? So after this, what has happened? This particular idea of HIV drugs was manufactured by many companies across the globe. And the cost of this particular drug abruptly came down by more than 99% in the next decade. Is it okay? The price of this particular drug came down by more than 99% in the next decade, which essentially means it was available to more people. It was affordable to more people. They could simply get access to this kind of a drug to fight against HIV. Done? So this is what is the discussion related to issue with access. What is the proposal of the government of India as well as South Africa? We must simply waive off the protection that is provided to, let's say, diagnostics machines, vaccines, drugs, technology, manufacturing of a mask, etc. Anything related to COVID or which is helpful in the COVID fight, we must simply waive these particular protections from the TRIPS. Right? If it is waived off, respective countries don't have to enforce these particular laws. For example, if it is not waived off, imagine there is one company in India which is started manufacturing remdesivir. It doesn't have the voluntary license. It doesn't have any license whatsoever with respect to manufacturing of this. It starts manufacturing of this. Then the company Gilead can simply take this particular company to court. They can file a complaint against this particular company. So it will simply fall into a dispute. It has to battle this particular company, Gilead company, which is a multinational company, in the court. Now if a waiver is provided, then the protection will not be given to the companies. Then any company in India, again, provided they have got the license or approvals from the government, they can start manufacturing these particular products. Done? That is the idea of a waiver which is being discussed here. Having said so, remember this also. The proposal clearly states that we are only focused on pandemic. That is, anything related to COVID-19, we want a waiver under that. We do not want a full waiver from the TRIPS. We are only focused on COVID-19. For example, any vaccine related to COVID-19, we must waive the protection. Any technology related to COVID-19, we must waive the protection. So argument is, we are not asking for a full blanket waiver under the TRIPS. No, we are not asking for full blanket waiver. We are only asking a waiver with respect to the drugs, vaccines, technology, diagnostics related to containing, protecting and basically prohibiting the spread of the COVID-19. That is the proposal which has been provided or which has been put forward by India and South Africa. Once this particular proposal was put forward, there were many other countries which came and supported India as well as the South African proposal. But there were other countries which opposed the waiver. For example, until very recently, underline the term, until very recently, USA was opposed to this. European Union, Canada, Australia, many other countries were opposed to this. But please understand this is a silver lining now. USA, which was opposed to this because it was the earlier administration which was opposed to the waiver, now very recently on Wednesday itself has stated that we will accept or we will support the waiver of the TRIPS or the protection that is accorded to any of these particular aspects related to fight against the COVID. And that's a very, very good news. Having said so, it doesn't mean everything is hunky-dory now. It doesn't mean that it is going to go through the idea of the TRIPS waiver only. Now, have a look at this. If at all a waiver is provided, what is the process? What is the process? Remember this very carefully. If you go back to the first slide that I discussed related to WTO, the highest decision making body is what? Ministerial conference. But till June 2021, there is no ministerial conference now. So as a result of this, which is the other decision making body now? It is the General Council. First point. So if the waiver has to be provided, if not ministerial conference, who will provide it? General Council. First. Second, now the process of waiver basically starts with the first step. What is the first step? The proposal for waiver has to be prepared. Proposal has to be prepared and it has to be submitted to Council for TRIPS. Is it okay? There is a Council for TRIPS under the General Council. Submit it. Once the proposal has been submitted, within next 90 days, they will have to prepare a report on this, either accept it or reject it, and they will have to submit it to General Council. And in the General Council, we will go for voting. If it is a consensus based approach, that is, if every member country agrees, then there is no question, all the member countries are agreeing, consensus is obtained, then we will simply waive off the protection under the TRIPS for all of these. If not, if there is no consensus, there is a provision which says that you will have to get at least a majority of 75%. At least 75% of the voting has to be in favor of a waiver to the TRIPS as such. Right? So this is a basic idea of a waiver for the protection which is given to these particular commodities or the intellectual property rights under the TRIPS related to COVID-19. Now, what are the arguments in favor as well as against the waiver? What are the arguments? Let me start with in favor of the waiver as such. Okay. In favor, have a look at this. It will definitely provide access to the producers across the globe. Right now, many countries are getting ravaged because of the pandemic spread. Now, in this particular situation, what if the suppliers are not supplying sufficient vaccines to these particular countries, are not supplying sufficient drugs to these particular companies? there is no sufficient technology or diagnostics machines that are available in these particular countries. Don't you think that will delay the process of supplying and the death toll will increase in these countries? So when the waiver is provided, it will provide a huge access to the producers in these particular countries. Second, in developing many of these particular vaccines or drugs or technology for that matter, many of these pharmaceutical companies have actually got access to public funding. I just want to quote the issue of a Gilead here. It is said that a Gilead company, which is a US based company, got $70 million of a public funding to develop remdesivir. Now, when it is the question of paying back in the form of, let's say, welfare, right, humanitarian cause, it is not budging with respect to providing a free access to their patents. Anyways, third one is, if free access is not provided, if the waiver is not provided, those rich countries will easily get access to these kinds of technology, vaccines, drugs, etc. They will be able to contain the pandemic. And the poorer countries, LDCs, least developed countries, developing countries such as India, there is a delay with respect to supply of the vaccines to these particular countries. That inequality which is present already in the system, in the global market, this inequality, that is the haves and have-nots, will further expand like this. Next, please understand this, the demand for vaccines, demand for drugs, demand for diagnostics is very, very high. Because please understand, this pandemic is not contained to one country, it is not limited to one country, it has a pan-global presence now. In this particular situation, very few producers of this will not be able to supply the demand for all of these particular equipments in the international market. So more and more producers should be given the right so that the supply also increases. Next, various countries are basically arguing, anyways compulsory licensing is there. We have discussed what is the idea of compulsory licensing. They are saying that under the TRIPS itself, there is the idea of a compulsory licensing. Why don't countries use a compulsory licensing? Why are they asking for a waiver? But the argument here is, yes, compulsory licensing is there, but it is very difficult to first implement compulsory licensing. Second, before implementing compulsory licensing, there is a whole process which is supposed to be followed by the government, and that will basically delay the process further. So idea of a compulsory licensing is not the solution in this particular case. Then, please understand this, if India is ravaged by the pandemic, developed countries such as USA will also be affected. For a simple reason, there is a trade relation between these particular countries. India will conduct trade with USA, China will conduct trade with USA, USA will export some of the goods to India. So there is a trade relation, and that is the outcome of globalization. So have a look at this, if the trading partners are being ravaged, their economy is getting affected and destroyed by the pandemic, it is not just that country which will face the impact of this. Other trading partners will also definitely feel the heat. Right? So because majority of the countries or different countries, important countries in terms of supply chain management are being ravaged, are being affected by the pandemic, developed economies will definitely feel the impact of the pandemic. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why waiver should be provided. Why waiver should not be provided, right? Have a look at this. One, pharmaceutical companies, they basically argue that because there is a protection, I've invested. Is it okay? In research and development, it is not an easy process. Huge amount of investment is done. Clinical trials are conducted for months and months together. Lot of expenditure is incurred. So why did I spend so much of money? Because there was a protection in the form of a patent. Now what you are talking of is basically taking away my right of a patent. If you snatch away the patent right from me and if everybody starts producing it, then there is a question of protection of my rights, first one. Second, if everybody starts producing it, so why should I invest in the research and development? Look at the third argument, second argument here. If it is waived off, what if in the future same situation will happen? If not COVID, something else. And at that point of time, because it is affecting the market or if it is affecting the public health like this, who will invest in the research and development? Because they would have experienced the situation in the COVID where they had invested and the patent rights were basically waived off. Then the question is, in the next time or in the next situation, when you need me to invest in research and development, I'll say, thank you, I will not invest. So this might affect the future investments in life-saving drugs. And the third one, anyways, the compulsory license route is there, use it. So these are some of the arguments in favor of the waiver. Now, this is the critical evaluation of the two aspects under the WTO. Now, the last point with respect to the waiver under the TRIPS is, even if the waiver is provided, let's assume the situation that waiver is granted under WTO. Does it mean that we will win the fight against the COVID? Does it mean that everything will be good? Absolutely no. There are certain constraints which are not generally discussed and which will definitely have an impact on how soon we will get over pandemic, how soon we will contain the pandemic. What are these particular issues? Have a look at this. One, any waiver like this, any waiver that is provided will simply protect the other producers from law. That is, imagine you hold a patent. If I am producing without taking your permission, then you will simply file a complaint against me. You will sue me in the court. And when the waiver is provided, that protection is not given to you. So only the legal section or only the legal objection will be waived off. Whatever are the legal sanctions, that will be waived off. That doesn't mean that I can simply start producing these particular vaccines. Why? There is a very simple concept here. These particular vaccines involve genetic mutations. That is, they involve the process of making changes to the genetic makeup. And reverse engineering these particular genetic mutations is very, very difficult. Just waiver will not solve the problem. Me as a manufacturer, me as a producer should also get access to what kind of a product you are using, what kind of a technology you are using, how much clinical trials you have conducted, in what way you conducted this particular manufacturing process. I will have to get access to all of that. Now, various experts are saying even if the protection is waived off under TRIPS, it is very doubtful that, because these are involving genetic mutations, it is very doubtful that other countries or developing countries, especially countries such as India, whether they will have sufficient technology to manufacture these particular drugs or vaccines for that matter. So that is one argument here. Second, even if you develop drugs, even if you develop vaccines, the healthcare system itself is crumbling in India. Is it okay? Even if you develop the vaccines, if you have, let's assume the drugs, sufficient drugs, the healthcare system is crumbling. Best example, India. Even if you have drugs, what if sufficient oxygen is not available? What if a sufficient number of beds are not available to treat the patients? Doesn't matter how many vaccines you have, doesn't matter how many drugs you have, right? There will be a toll in the form of a higher deaths because of the crumbling healthcare system. And the final one, have a look at this. Whether the least developing countries and the developing countries, will they have sufficient manufacturing capacity? Will they have the sufficient manufacturing capacity to manufacture all the required diagnostic equipments, to manufacture all the drugs that are required, all the vaccines that are required to contain the pandemic? So even if the waiver is provided, even after that, there will be certain issues which will plague India's fight against the COVID, just like any of these developing countries as well as LDCs. So this is the overall discussion with respect to the discussion of the waiver or the issue of a waiver under the TRIPS. So what we have done, let me put it in a nutshell. First, we have discussed the concept of agriculture subsidies, why MSP is the central theme there, why there is a discussion with respect to MSP as well as peace clause in the recent times in the newspapers. That's the first one. Second one, what is the TRIPS, right? What is the protection provided under TRIPS, why the waiver is required, and what are the arguments in favor as well as against the concept of a waiver. So that's it from my side with respect to this particular topic. If you like our initiative, please hit the like button and provide your valuable inputs in the comment section below. If you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please subscribe to it. Thank you. Have a good day.